Hello and welcome! In this lecture we're going to start using Cinemachine, which is an excellent Unity package that makes camera handling super easy. Okay, so our units already have a basic move action and we have a decently sized grid. However, if I move the unit, then I can no longer see it. So now it's a great time to add some camera controls. Like I said, we're going to be using Cinemachine. This is a official Unity package that makes camera handling super easy. It's only going to take us about 5 minutes to create a game character controller. Whereas if we were to build it ourselves, it would probably take days. So to install it, let's go into the package manager. So up into Window, open up the package manager. Then under packages, make sure you select the Unity registry. And now just scroll down and find the Cinemachine package. So here it is. Now for this, pretty much any version will work. As of the time of this recording, I'm going to be using the latest version, so 2.8.6. So just go ahead, click on install. Alright, it's been installed. You can verify that by going into Game Object, and over here you should see a Cinemachine tab. These are all of the various types that we can create. So let's create a brand new virtual camera. And as soon as you click on that, you see a new object created in the hierarchy. So over here, the Cinemachine Virtual Camera 1. Let's rename this to a proper name. So let's call this Cinemachine Virtual Camera. And now in this game object, if you look in the inspector, you can see it as the Cinemachine Virtual Camera component. And over here it has tons of options that we're going to see in a bit. And also when you click to add that button, it adds this little icon to the main camera. And if we select the main camera, we can see that icon refers to the Cinemachine brain component right here. Basically, the way that Cinemachine works is it works with virtual cameras, and then those virtual cameras drive the main camera. So for example, now if I try modifying the transform over here on the main camera, nope, it does not work. That is because if you want to change these settings, then you need to change them in the virtual camera. Okay, so let's set up this virtual camera. First up over here, we've got a follow and a look at field. These are game objects or transforms. So let's create an empty one. So let's create in the hierarchy a new empty game object. Let's call this the camera controller. Let's reset the transform. So put it on 0, 0, 0. Now this object is meant to be invisible. It's meant to have no visual. So this is just going to act as a target for the camera. And now for setting up the entire virtual camera, we can actually do that while the game is playing. All we need to do is make sure we tick this box, says save during play. So tick this and let's go into play mode. Alright, so here we have the scene view and game view side by side. Now the first thing we want to set, like I said, is over here the follow field. So let's drag our camera controller, let's drag the reference. And just like this, if now I move the camera controller object, if I move it, you can see the camera always follows behind it. Then the other important field is the look at, so let's drag the same reference, so the camera controller. Now if I grab the camera controller and I move it, the camera is always following and always looking at this object. Then for the other options, up here we've got the lens vertical FOV. By default it's set to 60, but since our game has a top-down view, it's usually better to have a slightly narrower FOV, just so we don't have too much distortion in the corners. So in our case, for our game, let's put it at 50. Then next important one is over here the settings for the body. And importantly, here we've got a drop-down menu where we can play around with all of the various settings, the various behaviors that we want this camera to work like. If you want, you can go read more about each of these in the Cinemachine package documentation. For this game, like I said, we want an overhead camera that we can control, so let's go with the basic transposer. For the settings, let's lock with the whirl up. Then for the follow offset here, this one is relative to the follow target, so that is why right now the camera controller is here and the actual camera is down here. So it's -10 on the Z, which if we see, yep, that's the offset, -10 on the Z. In our case, like I said, we want an overhead camera, so let's just increase it slightly on the Y, so maybe something like 7. And let's indeed keep the Z equals -10, meaning that we want the camera to be pretty much behind and slightly above our camera target. So as I move this, yep, this is pretty much the view that I want. And also another reason why we do want that Z offset to be in the negative is that now we can also apply rotation to the camera controller. So far we've just been moving, but if I grab the rotate tool, you can either press the E key or up here click on the rotate tool. With this, if I now rotate, yep, it does rotate the camera around. So this is going to make it super easy to make the camera rotate. And just with these settings, so just in 5 minutes, we already have a pretty nice camera setup. We have a nice object that we can move and the camera always looks at it. And then as you can see, it automatically has some smoothing by default. So we can modify those. So in the virtual camera on the body here, we've got the X, Y, and Z damping. Now if you were to increase all of these, then all of a sudden the movement becomes super slow and super smooth. So it takes quite a while to reach the target position. And then down here on the aim portion, again, you also have multiple things. So let's stick with the default composer. And again, you also have a bunch of damping as well as dead zones and so on. So tons and tons of options. Now, like I said, in our case, we want an overhead camera. And in this type of game, making it nice and snappy feels much better. So in our case, what I really like to do is just set all of the damping down to 0, so pretty much 0 damping. And also here on the aim, horizontal and vertical damping also at 0. So now if I move the camera controller, yep, now there's no more smoothing. For the game that we're trying to make, I think this one makes perfect sense. We're going to manually control this camera controller, and that object will indeed have some smoothing, so we prefer to add smoothing to the actual object that we're going to move as opposed to the Cinemachine camera. Alright, so that's really it. These are the settings that we're going to use by default. And again, here we have this object, we can move it around, we can even rotate it left and right, and whatever we do, our camera always follows perfectly. Now before you stop playing the game, make sure you select the virtual camera and make sure you tick save during play. So if you now exit play mode, and yep, all of the changes are saved except for the follow and look at reference. So let's drag those, let's drag that one and the other one. And yep, everything else should have saved correctly. So now if I got the Cinemachine camera controller, I can move the object around, I can rotate, and yep, it always follows. Alright, great. Okay, so in this lecture, we installed Cinemachine and we set up a basic camera. Now in the next lecture, let's make a script to actually control it.